All right, so this video is well overdue. I did the long explanation of how I set up my tool paths in MillMage and was working on a project and was going to shortly thereafter release the results of that project, but I basically had everything go wrong that could go wrong. So I can't even count. Well, we'll count the number of errors. Here, we'll start with the first one. So I had rearranged and put my rapid change ATC here on the y-axis where it used to be on the x-axis. And when it was on the x-axis, the dust boot, that's reprinted now, but the dust boot fit fine and I tested it and it was good. So I set the dust boot back up. I did my first tool change and didn't realize that with how I had it set, it crushed, or it didn't crush this, it cracked the dust boot, but it came down to pick up bit 1, and because of the way that the dust boot is shaped, so this comes off of here, this part here impacted here and cracked the dust boot and broke it, and that was error number 1. So I decided to run the job without the dust boot, and so for the first profile, the first operation was just a center point roundover bit and did an outline of the design, and that was fine. It went to do a bit change and it didn't spin off properly in the rapid change ATC, and the rapid change ATC IR sensors didn't pick up the fact that the nut was still on there, and it tried to do a bit change with a bit in it onto a current bit. Luckily, I was able to stop the machine and reset and get that sorted out. But that was error number 2 in this project. So what that ended up being was kind of twofold. One, it was a really cheap center point bit with a not a consistent shaft diameter, and so when I put it on, it was able to tighten more than it was able to undo. And so that was not ideal. But I've since ordered a new center point bit that should be more consistent, but that I will chalk up to a bit and collet issue because of the weird shape of that center point roundover shaft. So I will, say you don't have to buy the most expensive bits, but buying quality bits is kind of the key, as I'm finding out, especially with automation. When I tighten them manually, it's not a big deal, but when you're looking to automate things, having it be consistent and reliable is ideal. So issue number, so that brought up kind of, I guess, the third issue that stopped things was we found out the reason that the IR sensor didn't trip is that the housings had the IR sensor a little bit too far this way, so it couldn't detect if the nut was on the shaft properly. And so worked with Rapid Change ATC support. They were able to determine the problem, and they sent me new files to print the end caps. So I reprinted the end caps, and it's been awesome since then. So that kind of was issue number, was kind of another issue, but it was related to the bit almost, sticking itself. So that brings me to kind of issue 3 or 4. We'll call it 4. So issue 4 was it picked up the 1/4-inch end mill, but in all those operations, I hadn't noticed that quite a bit of dust and debris had fallen into the collet nut, and so it didn't tighten the collet all the way. So even because I wasn't running a dust boot, my bed was dirtier than normal, and like I said, dust was able to accumulate in the collet nut, and so it didn't tighten properly. And that led to, as you saw in the intro, a pretty bad failure. So this pocket here in this section ended up getting cut out at all kinds of wonky depths. Some were really light passes, some were too heavy. It was kind of all over the place. And then it went to do this pocket. It did it, and at a little bit lower than it was supposed to end up, but not as bad as this pocket. But then it drove the bit through the side of the project when it moved over here. And that's when the spindle stalled out because it was trying to cut 10 or 12 mils deep at that point. And so yeah, the spindle stalled out and threw the workpiece around the CNC bed. So that wasn't good either. So, I left those issues in there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about fixing this little bit, but it was a time to get it off the CNC bed. I'll fix it up with some manual, some hand tools and stuff like that after, or figure out what I'm going to do with it. So yeah, the bit slipping, like I said, was due to dust buildup. So again, you need to, if you're going to run the Pro model of the Rapid Change ATC, I definitely recommend making sure that your dust collection is on point, because if you get too much dust and debris, or really any dust and debris, it can impact loading and bit tightness and stuff like that. So definitely make sure, or as I'm doing, I reached out to Rapid Change and talked to them about getting the upgrade parts to change this Pro to a Premium. So I'm working with them to get that sorted, which is basically a microcontroller. I have the servos that fit already, and I've printed all of the extra parts. So really it's just the microchip with the programming for it, and it plugs into the board that's already on the Pro unit. So hopefully that's not too bad. I will probably do a quick video when I make that change. But the new printed housings are working awesome for the sensor, and it definitely fixed that. So that kind of brings me to the next issue. You can see that here these walls are very thin. That was not the intention. As well, you can see where my center point bit line was. This was supposed to be the outline of the project on the outside, but I had to abandon that idea because these walls, if I'd cut it here, would have been so thin. So I had to go back in and edit the file and bump this out a little bit. So again, a little bit of cleanup work and some fixes there. I'll figure that out later. Good thing this is for me and not a client. So what had happened there is this is a what's supposed to be a 3/4 inch bowl bit from Speed Tools. And I've had this happen a couple times now where I've gone onto Amazon. I do order most of my bits from Amazon. But I've gone on and I've ordered a Speed Tool bit, and it hasn't come in what I would consider kind of Speed Tool packaging. It comes in a pretty generic white container, and I have to look back at the order. Maybe what happened is it was from a third-party seller selling, quote-unquote Speed Tool bits. But anyway, I hadn't used it before. This was the first project I was using it for. And so when I was building the tool database, I just went on to Amazon, looked up my order, and inputted the dimensions based on the bit I ordered. I went to Speed Tools. They had the dimensions of the bit that I ordered and inputted them. Should have been fine. Now, I mean, looking at this with the clarity of hindsight, it definitely looks bigger than 3/4 inch. So if I was to take and measure this. Sorry, it's a little bit tricky right now. Yeah. 1 second. You can see this is not a 1/4 inch bit. This is a 1 inch bit. So when you input a 3/4 inch bit in your CNC software and then use a 1 inch bit, you end up with very, very problematic pieces. So, like I said, this separator was way smaller than it should have been, and otherwise the bit did really well. The surface finish is super smooth. This is without any sanding. I've got a couple fuzzies here and stuff, but yeah, overall there is no ridges. There's a little bit of maybe like tooling. You can see some tooling swirls. But yeah, there is no, nothing to catch my fingernail on. Super good bottom finish. So really happy with the bit. But like I said, it's a 1 inch bit, not a 3/4 inch bit. I'll put that up on the screen you can see that what I purchased was the 3/4 inch bit. Should I have checked it physically? Yes. But I didn't. So that kind of was the last error of the project. Luckily, after that, I was able to, get the project cut out, and I'm going to get it off the CNC bed. So it's a bit of a bitter-sweet end to the work I did on the Milmage toolpath video, because like I said, I only really had one automated bit change that worked properly, and other than that, it was a lot more fiddling and a lot more futzing and a lot more time than I was really hoping for. So yeah, anyway, I'm really hoping that my next project goes a lot smoother and that I can get the results out a lot faster, because yeah, this took a while to get done. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.